why you need to get involved in growing your own food. Even the best raised eggs you find in the store have been treated, have been washed in chemicals. So pasteurized dairy is, again, junk food. But you still get microplastics, endocrine disrupting chemicals, and residue pharmaceuticals into your honey, making that raw honey anything but healthy. And that's the reason why you need to get involved somehow in growing or raising your own food, at least some of it. You're listening to the Primal Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kummer, and my goal is to help you achieve optimal health by bridging the gap between ancestral living and the demands of modern society. Get ready to unlock the transformative power of nature as the ultimate biohack, revolutionizing your health and reconnecting you with your primal self. My goal with the Primal Shift Podcast is to show you how to achieve optimal health, and that includes the health of your body's largest organ, your skin. Today's sponsor, OneSkin, has a line of topical supplements powered by the OS01 peptide. It's the first ingredient scientifically proven to reduce the accumulation of senescent cells. That's one of the hallmark signs of aging. And for a limited time, my listeners will get 15% off their first OneSkin purchase with code MKUMMER at oneskin.co. That's oneskin.co. And now back to the episode. Outsourcing food production is not just foolish, it's downright irresponsible, especially when you consider how vital food is to our health and well-being. Trusting faceless corporations with your nourishment means embracing a cocktail of chlorine-washed poultry, soilless organic strawberries, and Sterilox-treated veggies, all while pretending these practices are remotely beneficial. It's almost comical how we've handed over the reins of our sustenance to industries that prioritize shelf life and overnutrition and convenience over quality. Now, I know this sounds harsh, but here's the thing. Misguided federal and state regulations make it virtually impossible for farmers to sell unadulterated food that hasn't been sprayed, disinfected, irradiated, pasteurized, fumigated, or chlorinated before it hits the shelves of your grocery store. So in this episode, I'll share with you some eye-opening examples of how unhealthy, even healthy food can be, and make the case why you need to get involved in growing your own food. So let's start with pastured eggs, or store-bought eggs in general, but particularly those that are marketed as pastured and regeneratively raised, if there is such a thing with poultry even, or with egg production. And why those eggs are not as clean and healthy as you might think. So let's take pastured eggs, for example, that you buy in the store. Those eggs have been washed with a chlorine solution or something equally toxic to neutralize potentially harmful pathogens. And you think, well, that makes sense. You don't want to have any poop on your eggs. But the problem is eggshells are porous. And so there is a good probability that some of that chemical residue on the shell gets into the egg and then into your body. And the main thing to remember is that if you feed animals an unnatural diet that changes their gut flora and stomach acidity, you create an environment where harmful pathogens, like certain strains of E. coli or Salmonella, can thrive. Those pathogens don't exist in an environment where animals are raised appropriately, at least not those specific, very harmful strains, that is. For example, Salmonella is a naturally occurring pathogen in chicken poop, which is something that we here at the Kummer household are exposed to daily because we have chickens and a host of other livestock. And do you really think we wash our hands every time we return from handling the chickens, or wash our eggs before cooking, even if they have some quote-unquote dirt on them, poop that is? We don't. And none of us has ever gotten sick. And that's because the strains of pathogens found in the manure of animals raised appropriately aren't an issue, unless maybe you're severely immunocompromised. On the other hand, if you get eggs from free-range eggs from chickens raised in a henhouse with 2,000 of your closest siblings, that's a whole different ballgame. And those are not eggs you want to buy anyway. At least those are not eggs that I would ever consume. So the point here really is that even the best raised eggs you find in the store have been treated, have been washed in chemicals that can make their way into the egg that you consume. So you still get chemicals from the most expensive eggs you can find in the store. And that's why I recommend buying eggs directly from farmers who don't wash them. And fortunately, there's no federal mandate, as of right now at least, to wash eggs when sold outside of supermarkets. So you can go to the farmer's market or even to your local farm and buy some of those eggs and get them without being exposed to those toxins. Second example, and that might home a little bit, is chicken meat, because a lot of people like chicken meat, including our kids, and even, we like it. The problem is that much like eggs, chicken carcasses are bathed in chlorine before being packaged. So you can be sure you get some of that crap into your body by consuming the chicken meat that you buy in the store. It's also worth noting that raising chickens for healthy meat is impossible if you want to make a profit. So farmers have to take shortcuts. And that is because virtually all chickens raised in this country, in the United States at least, are Cornish cross that go from birth to butcher in 7 to 8 weeks. And I've talked to Dr. Anthony Gustin on a separate episode I'm going to link down below about why that is a problem. But in a nutshell, their genetics of those Cornish cross and their rapid growth lead to indigestible protein and other health issues. Plus, they're usually fed a diet high in polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, and those are very inflammatory if you get too many of them. And those high PUFA diets in chickens lead to a terrible fatty acid composition in their meat. So you consume the high PUFAs then through their meat, and they end up in your body causing inflammation. And unfortunately, raising the Cornish cross on a conventional grain diet is the only way to make money selling chickens. Because we did the math with our last batch of broilers, those are meat birds specifically raised for their meat, and concluded that raising one bird cost us approximately $30 to $35. Imagine how much we'd have to charge for those chickens if we were in the poultry business. And our chickens are expensive because we opted for a slower growing breed that takes 12 weeks instead of the 7 to 8 weeks to grow. And we used organic, corn, soy-free, low PUFA feed that's 3 times as expensive as regular chicken feed. Now, the resulting meat is significantly better from a micro and macronutrient composition perspective than what's commercially available. But most importantly, our chicken meat has dramatically lower PUFA levels. Now, that doesn't make chicken meat great, because it's still, all the meat of monogastric animals is more problematic from a fatty acid composition than the meat of ruminant animals, like cows, for example. But it's still significantly better. But the point here really is that those type of chickens that we raise on our homestead for our personal consumption, we're not a chicken or poultry business. You can't do that if you want to make money, selling chickens. Now, there are some farms out there that do raise different breeds, but they typically still use the high PUFA feed because, as I said, it's just not economically feasible to raise chickens on a low PUFA organic corn soy-free feed. It just doesn't work. And so you can be sure that when you purchase chickens in the store, or even when you purchase them from farms who mean doing well, you still get a chicken that was bathed in chlorine and that was fed a high PUFA diet. And so that turns basically chicken meat into junk food. Better than Cheerios, yeah, but still not something you want to consume on a regular basis. Third example is milk or dairy in general. Most of the dairy, unless you live in certain states, is pasteurized. Pasteurization kills pathogens, kills bacteria, kills anything that's bioactive. Enzymes, bacteria, obviously good and bad bacteria. And that's here really, again, the problem. Raw milk, the benefits of raw milk is because it has bioactive ingredients. It's live food, You get a lot of the beneficial micronutrients, the enzymes, the bacteria that help your gut microbiome, etc. And when you buy pasteurized, all of that is dead. And some of the protein has been denatured, reduced micronutrient content, etc., etc. So pasteurized dairy is, again, junk food. Unfortunately, in most states or in many states, you cannot buy raw dairy unless it's labeled for pet consumption. One might think, well, it's a good idea to pasteurize dairy because otherwise, a lot of people would get sick. But similar to what I've mentioned with the chickens, there's certain strains, the dangerous strains of E. coli in raw milk only exist in dairies where the cattle is fed an unnatural diet, grains, for example, because that changes the stomach acidity, making those pathogens more resistant to the higher stomach acid like we have as humans. And so when they're resistant to stomach acid, they can get into our digestive tract and survive in our body and cause issues. With regular E. coli bacteria that die in certain acidic environments, like in human stomach, it's not an issue. And so again, the milk or the dairy products, generally speaking, you buy in the store, at least here in Georgia, are junk food and not something you want to consume. And that again, makes the point of, or raises the argument of, well, growing your own food. And we'll get to that and talk about that in more detail, what that might mean and how you can actually do that without becoming a farmer. Fourth example I want to give you, and we'll wrap it up here shortly, but those are such eye-opening examples that I really want to make sure you understand. Raw honey. Everyone thinks raw honey is great because, it hasn't been heated. It's full of those, bioactive micronutrients, the enzymes and all of the things that make honey so beneficial and significantly better than just plain old sugar, right? So what could possibly be wrong with raw honey, you might ask? Well, the problem is, like raising chickens, raising honeybees for honey the right way is relatively expensive and commercially probably not viable. And without going into too much detail here, I want to mention that every beekeeper I've ever met uses either plastic foundations to quote-unquote help bees draw comb and make hive maintenance easier. And again, we're not going to go into details, but if you don't use those plastic foundations, there is a risk that, the bees draw a comb that's, where two frames are connected to each other, and that makes hive maintenance a pain in the butt. I understand, I am a beekeeper and I know how cross comb can really make your life more difficult. So using plastic foundations to kind of guide the bees where they should draw the comb, so you can take the frames out individually and everything is good, makes a lot of sense from a convenience perspective. The second thing that what most beekeepers do is they treat their hives proactively, during certain times of the year with chemicals or with pharmaceuticals to prevent certain pests from becoming a problem, like mites, like hive beetles, like, other insects and microbes that can make bees sick. And so they treat the bees, on a regular basis. Unfortunately, by doing those two things, you get honey that's been exposed to microplastics, to endocrine disrupting chemicals in the plastic, because especially in summer, the high heat, heating up those plastic foundations, that's just a recipe for leaching endocrine disrupting chemicals into the honey that you then consume. The microplastics, obviously, there are microplastics involved in pretty much everything that's associated with plastic. And then you get some of those chemicals or the chemical residue from those pharmaceuticals in your honey as well. And even though then the honey is not heated, when processed, meaning when, produced, when extracted from the combs and bottled and everything, but you still get microplastics, endocrine disrupting chemicals, and residue of pharmaceuticals into your honey, making that raw honey anything but healthy. And that's another reason why we only consume our own honey, where there is no plastic involved, there is no pharmaceutical involved, nothing. Next example is produce that's harvested before it's ripe. A lot of the produce you find in the store, got harvested before it was ripe. And so it had no longer contact with soil and getting all of the nutrients from the soil. It was no longer exposed to sunlight. Instead, it was gassed probably and being exposed to artificial light to continuing the ripening process in a warehouse. And the result of that, unfortunately, is that you get produce that has significantly fewer micronutrients, meaning vitamins and minerals, than you would find in produce that you grow yourself. So you buy food that's less nutritious And even though you think you buy organic tomatoes or organic whatever, and you still get products that are just not as they should be. And in some cases, some of the, especially fruits like strawberries, they are raised in a water solution, in hydroponic solutions. They never get any contact with soil whatsoever. And then thinking that's as nutritious as a strawberry that's grown in actual soil, in fertile soil, is just naive. And even if you get, properly raised produce in the store, many stores use you might have seen it. You go to the store and you see like those little sprinklers or misters coming on that, keeps the fresh produce look fresh and stuff. But what a lot of people don't know is that some stores use antimicrobial products like Sterilox that contains chlorine and chlorine byproducts to prevent the growth of pathogens, on the skin of the produce, for example. And so again, you get organic produce from the store that might have not even been harvested when it was ripe, and then it was sprayed with a chlorine solution to keep it fresh for longer. And that's the stuff that you eat, So the bottom line here really is that it's incredibly difficult to find truly healthy food in the store because of regulations and industry interests that prefer obviously profits and shelf life over your health. That's a problem. And that's the reason why you need to get involved somehow in growing or raising your own food, at least some of it. And that could mean, planting a garden, and if you don't have a garden, outdoors or a backyard, grow something on the inside, have like a little, window garden, do something so you learn what it truly takes to grow food. Because when you understand that, growing something organically is incredibly difficult without using any chemicals whatsoever. And then you realize that, there are actually chemicals you can buy that are labeled as organic, even though you're not supposed to wash your hands and don't get them, anywhere close to your face because they are still toxic. You kind of learn all of those things, and then you can start asking the right questions and really understand what it means, what certain labels mean or what they don't mean. Why free range is a complete BS label, or why just grass-fed is a BS label, because it doesn't really mean anything. But you only understand all of those things when you start getting involved, So grow something, plant something if you're into plants, or veggies or produce. Raise a tomato plant, do something and understand what it truly takes, how that food is supposed to look like, how it's supposed to taste, and how it's supposed to feel when you consume it, If you have a little bit more space, maybe raise some chickens. They are incredibly easy to raise, Raise rabbits. If chickens are not allowed, chances are rabbits are, because they don't make any noise. They're considered pets, in most jurisdictions. And so you can have a couple of rabbits, in your backyard, even if you have a small, yard, even if you raise them in cages, that's still better than buying most of the meat you can find in the store, or the alternative to that is if you really don't have any space or means to grow anything yourself, which I think is, there's always room for that, at least get to know your local farmers, and ask them, visit them, ask what they are doing, how they are growing your food. Make sure or try to find farmers that are not USDA regulated, because being regulated by the USDA means you have to bathe your chickens in chlorine, you have to wash your eggs, you have to do a lot of things that makes that food less healthy for you. But if you find a farmer who maybe labels their products as pet food, like here at the Alpharetta Farmers Market, close to where we live, there are a couple of farmers that sell chickens, eggs, raw milk as pet food, and that's a way to get around some of those USDA requirements that would mess with the food. So they can sell it unadulterated, so that means the raw milk is truly raw, the chicken was not bathed in chlorine, the eggs aren't washed in chlorine, they just come as, they come. Similar, very comparable to the eggs that we eat, to the chickens we eat, and to the rabbit meat that we eat, that we grow on our homestead. And by getting to know the farmer, you visit them. Most farmers who have nothing to hide have no issues with you coming to the farm and checking things out. if you live in the area here in the Alpharetta, Milton, Atlanta metro area, come by and watch how we grow some of our own food. We're not in the business of selling the food. I mean, we sometimes sell we do sell some of the eggs if we have more than what we need, but that's not our business. We just sell it to friends and family. But come by, and see how we raise food and how it's supposed to be done, to produce food that's actually healthy and that has not been exposed to chemicals that you don't want to get into your body. The bottom line here really is that outsourcing food production to people who don't give a crap about your health and well-being is a recipe for poor health, So get involved somehow by visiting someone who grows food and buying from them, learning from them, growing some of your own food to the extent possible, and maybe realizing or maybe reprioritizing, some of the things that you do in life. Maybe figuring out that, maybe it should be a priority that we move to an area where we are allowed to raise some of our own food, or we have the space to raise some of our own food instead of living in a fancy townhouse because it's convenient to walk to bars and restaurants, Maybe that's not ideal to stay healthy in the long run. Maybe that's fun when you're in your mid-20s or maybe mid-30s, but at some point, you have to figure out that you hopefully still have a couple of decades worth of living, and you want to live that remainder of your life as healthy as possible, and that means taking control of your food supply. So with that being said, we're going to wrap it up. Again, if you live in the area, stop by, check out the Cumber Homestead resources. We're going to link them all down below, our Instagram, our YouTube, our webpage, so you can learn how we do things, some of the mistakes we made, some of the things that we've discovered that triggered us to, raise a lot of our own food, like our chickens, like eggs, like rabbits for meat, and what we're going to do in the future with beef, pork, and some of the other proteins that we intend on raising, because we realize that, even the best raised animals you can buy from somewhere else are still not to the standard that we would like. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Hope I'll see you and hear you in the next episode.